Well, I'm going to start us off and try to time it so that we give Chuck plenty of time to talk about the good works he's been involved in. Um, I will introduce myself since I work for the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa, um, as I would if I were approaching a tribal community. Buju Anid, Nancy Shelton Dishnikaz, Nibiganawinjagawan, Kwe, Chigami Zibi, Kichigami. I am the Hello, Nancy Schultz. I am the water protection woman for the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa. Nagachiwanang is the place where the water slows down. So that is where the St. Louis River slows down and meets up with Ichigami, Lake Superior. And I've had the honor and the pleasure and the exciting opportunity to work as a water scientist for a tribal community for almost 30 years. I moved up to this area to take that job working for the tribal community. And I'll talk a little bit about, how I came as a Western trained, academic trained scientist, mainstream Protestant, by the way, um, and have come to work for a tribal community, and the interesting crosswalk and journey and education that these last 30 years have been for me. I got an education at the university, but I learned about life working for a reservation and trying to bring my gifts and skills to assist with a community that had a strong desire to do everything they could to protect the waters of the reservation. Fond du Lac is one of about 50 tribes nationwide that has taken on a federally designated water quality standards program. That may sound really bureaucratic to you, but it has been really crucial in our legal and jurisdictional standing to be able to take some battles a little further along than ordinary citizens can do acting alone. Um, Using tribal sovereignty, using delegated federal authorities under the Clean Water Act, we've been able to do a lot to protect the water resources of the reservation. And in fact, this whole area that are part of our ceded territories. I didn't talk a lot about that the last time, but Fond du Lac and other tribes here in northern Minnesota, over into Wisconsin and Michigan, have access to water resources and other resources to hunt, fish, and gather that were retained in perpetuity by the treaties across wide swaths of land called ceded territories, not just the reserved lands or reservations. So it's been a real education in environmental law and tribal law to be able to do this kind of work in a tribal community. But I hasten to emphasize that for the Fond du Lac Band and for all the Ojibwe people, water is life. They recognize that. They also recognize that all of the world around us, much as we were hearing in our morning sessions, we are all connected. We don't exist here in a little vacuum, in a bubble surrounded by the world around us. Everything that is on this earth that is created for us, the rocks, the trees, the water, the land, the fish, the birds, the breath of air that we have, all of this is part of a single system, and we are a part of that system too. And in Ojibwe worldview and tradition, there's a recognition that us, the two-leggeds, were the last to be placed on this earth. And in fact, we are in relation with all of the other beings and spirits on this earth, but all of them could exist just fine without us. Birds don't need us. Trees don't need us, but we need all that this earth has to be able to sustain our lives and our well-being and to continue forward. And so that's an interesting perspective that I was really, really happy to hear expounded upon this morning from all of our speakers, frankly. Um, again, I came to this place with a background in Western science, but what I have also really appreciated over the years has been the ability to sit down at the table with other agencies, state and federal agencies, with academia, to engage and build and create collaborative research relationships, to sit down with the governor's office, to have access to other decision makers, and to be able to increasingly bring our voice, backed up by knowledge and by values, to decisions that are being made about the world around us that affect all of us. Um, it is important to recognize that the pathway that the Fond du Lac Band chose to take on a water quality standards program actually gave us a certain legal and sovereign jurisdictional standing when it came time for decisions to be made about permitting the first ever copper nickel mine in the state of Minnesota. And it was because our reservation lies downstream of where this proposed PolyMet mine was intended to be built, and in fact, was actually permitted to be built. It was our ability to raise legal and jurisdictional arguments backed up by the science, backed up by tribal values and priorities and tribal authorities to say, no, this will not comply with the standards that we have set to protect the waters of the reservation. And this was not an overnight decision, mind you. This was after 10 years of environmental review and about another 4 or 5 years of permitting and public review, and agencies at every step of the way ready to give it the green light, and totally ignoring the law and the science that we kept bringing back to the conversation.
Was this
Yes.
just in the news in the last 2 weeks?
There's been a lot more similar. We're kind of in the middle of all of that, whether it's mining or Enbridge pipelines, or other kind of super fun cleanup sites. There's a number of mining projects on right now.
Seems to me that the state just recently said that no, they were not saying that it was a fuzzy kind of a definition, and they were actually going to hold one of the mining companies to the water standards. And they mentioned in the paper, that the Tribune, that it was because of the tribal, as well as the.
We've been engaged in a lot of battles.
Okay, I just wanted to
PolyMet was a big one,
that was huge.
but none of them happened overnight. They represent 20 years of concerted, collaborative, persistent effort on the part of tribes working together, not just the Fond du Lac Band, but tribes working together, finding allies where we could within academia and within state and federal agencies. They are there, but it has been an opportunity to give voice to reason and to put the brakes on bad decision making. And so, it's a battle, and there have been a couple in the news just recently. So, with that as kind of a background for where my professional life has been, and again, I want to emphasize that the real journey for me has been learning about the culture and the spirituality and the traditional values that the community that I work for hold dear, and recognizing that it really isn't all that different than what I feel and what I believe. I've been able to learn about how traditional ecological knowledge and Western science are just different ways of saying the same thing. I can name a number of examples, but that's been gratifying to be able to demonstrate for people who are doubtful that this traditional knowledge really is science. It is generations upon generations of systematic observational data. That is legitimate science. It just comes from a different place. It didn't come from a textbook or a laboratory. But there's been a number of opportunities for us to be able to show how they are linked together, and they are different ways of talking about and explaining and defining the same thing. A lot of the work that I have done over the years has revolved around just a very few really high-profile resources. Chief among them is the protection of Manoomin wild rice. And so as I kind of move into the more hopefully interactive part of this session, I want to share with you some of the gifts that have been given to us as just sensory reminders of all that is beautiful and sustainable in our world. I have Monoman in here. In fact, this birch basket was given to me as a wedding gift, and it was full of 5 pounds of Monoman. So it's being repurposed for that same thing. But you'll see there's sweetgrass, and you can smell it because it's really fresh. There's sage, there's maple syrup, there's blueberries, there's tobacco. But I just encourage you to enjoy with all of your senses and recognize and appreciate these gifts that have been given to all of us.
Can I take it home?
Nope. No, you can't, but you can talk to me later about where you might be able to find some. So at any rate, a project that I was involved in here recently, I mentioned that we've established some really good collaborations with academia, with the University of Minnesota Duluth, with the university down in the Twin Cities. We have built relationships. It hasn't just been the university coming saying, oh, we'd like to do this experiment here for you on the reservation. That's not the way to go about doing collaborations. We have built that relationship, that trust, that deep understanding and mutual respect. And most recently, we're wrapping up a project that, again, was related to Monoman. We're trying to find many different ways of communicating and finding different methods of reaching people where they are. Not everybody responds to a scientific report or a peer-reviewed journal article. In fact, a lot of people don't. Not everybody sees testimony down at the legislature or at an administrative law judge hearing. But there are other types of science and ways of knowing that involve the social sciences and the documentation of what people know and do and remember and have learned intergenerationally. And so more and more, we've been trying to find those ways to communicate differently about what we value so that people understand it and people recognize why we're fighting so hard to protect Monoman, why we're fighting so hard to reduce mercury in fish so that we can actually eat the walleye that we catch. And so this project had to do with interviewing a bunch of elders from several tribal nations with wild rice harvesters who were tribal or non-tribal. My husband and I have been harvesters now for years. It really does help me understand and connect with the world. But at any rate, documenting in a social science format these perceptions and these values was a way of elevating some of the common teachings amongst the indigenous people around intergenerational transfer of knowledge and learning and respect for all of creation, all that has been given to us to use, and ways of looking at it and understanding and connecting with it, and how it can kind of direct our healing and our restoration with the world around us. And so most of the responses were ultimately compiled and categorized under 4 broad teachings. What we've called them is teachings because they represent traditional knowledge passed down from generation to generation. And so I'm going to kind of walk through them a little bit, but hopefully it's not just to read to you what's on the page in front of you, it's to spark in your heads experiences that you've had, relationships that you've encountered, and to get all of us to kind of share what we are doing or have done or could potentially do that relate to these just basic frameworks and ways of looking at the world around us and how to heal what has been broken. So starting with the first teaching, if we don't use the gifts that we have been given, they will go away. We've all seen and heard and learned about environmental degradation, pollution, Superfund sites, dams and hydrologic modification, decimation of habitat, etc. We've all seen climate change. We've all seen and read about and experienced some of the things that we as humans have done to the world and to our relations on this planet. And the recognition is only the first step, because it represents intentionality and severing of that relationship between humans and the rest of our relations. And until we can recognize that relationship has been broken, we can't go about the process of rebuilding and restoring and healing that. So if we are not caring for our relatives, we become less connected to the world around us. The act of being out in a forest or paddling a canoe across the water, engaging in the world around us, snowshoeing on a sunny winter day across fluffy new snow. That connection with the natural world around us is a constant reminder that we are not separate, but we are a part of that whole. So that's a pretty fundamental teaching, and I think we heard quite a lot about that this morning. And so I guess I bring this up as an opportunity for you reflecting upon, what we've all been hearing and thinking about today and what I've just shared with you. Is there something about that that resonates with you that you would like to share for the greater good? How many of you have been in the boundary waters? Anybody want to share what that means to you on a spiritual level?
I think one of the greatest gifts from being on the waters is being able to engage with the stars. There is no comparison. That is the richest way to see the stars, to lay out there and to see it all. And even if you want to know about the stars, you can practice doing that and seeing it move at different times. But just to look at the Milky Way, we never see the Milky Way if we don't really get where the stars are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the biggest gifts from being up there in one.
Yeah, it's so vast. It really does help you put yourself in perspective.
It's vast and it's deep, and you know that every human entity, in wherever they are in the world, has looked at the stars and engaged.
Mm-hmm. A common human thread, right? Anyone else? Back there.
I have a cabin on Iron River and grew up there on a lake, and it is the place where I feel closest to God.
Mm-hmm. Like I said, when I was passing the birch basket around, it really engages all of your senses, doesn't it? I mean, it's tactile, and the sensory part of it really reaches our emotions as well. And I think it does for me also feel like worship, like being in a sanctuary. So we'll move on to the second teaching. We must make the time to reconcile our relationships and to reconnect with the natural world and our relatives. So this is kind of similar. The idea of just being able to walk the land, paddle the water, harvest the gifts, and be in community across generations and across cultures. My first opportunity to rice was with a band member that took me out and showed me how to pole. I was terrible at poling, but then he showed me how to knock. And I'm a berry picker at heart, so I was pretty good at that. And I've tried to get better with it over time. But it was an elder at the time, somebody quite a bit older than me, and somebody of another culture who was willing to share with me what had been handed down to him across many generations. It was really powerful and impactful for me. And so that's why my husband and I practice that now. We look forward to the harvest as almost as much as he looks forward to opening day of the fishing season. But in that being on the water, have any of you riced? Are any of you harvesters? It is sound. the sound of the kernels of the grains falling into your canoe, the smells, the vision, the ache in your shoulders after 6 hours of paddling or pulling or knocking or whatever. It totally engages all of you, mind, body, and soul. Being respectful of different ways of knowing, as I mentioned before, what was such an aha moment for me in being able to connect the science as I had been trained with the traditional knowledge, and recognizing and respecting that there are different ways of knowing the world around you and being observant. Being in relationship with these gifts that I passed around in the birch bark basket, recognizing that they too have the spirit, and um, being grateful, showing gratitude, literally offering thanks and gratitude in the way that it is done in many indigenous cultures is through the offering of tobacco. That was another act that was shared with me. A traditional act is that when you go out to harvest rice, you give an offering of tobacco. You're thanking the water and you're thanking Monoman itself for giving itself to you. Same with if you're harvesting a fish or a deer. You thank that animal because it is giving itself to you to sustain you. And recognition and respect and honoring the fact that other beings are there to help and support you is an important part of reconnecting. Recognizing that we as humans have done a pretty good job of degrading and diminishing these natural resources and natural systems. We can't always fix everything. We can't always get every ecosystem back to baseline or pre-European contact, but we absolutely can stop making things worse. And so a lot of the opportunities I've had working for the band have been about that restoration, cleaning up contaminated sites, undoing the effects of previous generations' changes to the landscape and to the quality of the environment. We're never going to get back what was there before, but we can do a lot better. As far as doing better in the future, thinking about climate change and the actions that we can take, some of the most important things we can do are continuing to protect the integrity and the resilience of our natural landscapes, our wetlands, our forests, our water systems. By protecting their high quality, they are going to be more resilient in being able to withstand those climate change impacts that we are absolutely already experiencing. Oh, and then lastly, and this is no small matter, but the actual action of going out on the water into the woods to harvest, to rice, it's work. And when you actually do that hard physical work, you do have a stronger connection and an appreciation for that world around us. In our previous session, we had a young woman speak up about being involved in a maple sugar bush right now. I mean, that's kind of what's going on right now in this season. Is a lot of people are out tapping their maple trees and boiling down maple syrup and making maple sugar sometimes. That's a lot of work. It's a lot of work over a shortened period of time, but it absolutely gives you a huge appreciation for how good that actual maple syrup is, as opposed to the Aunt Jemimas you can buy in the grocery store. So, with regards to this set of teachings, is there anything that anybody that it particularly resonated with you that you'd like to share? Yes, ma'am.
Picking wild blueberries.
Oh my God.
And it's work.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, especially having to keep your radar up for the bears, right? Yes.
I think of the hard work. The past 5 years, I've been transforming my front lawn into a pollinator garden. And we live in a neighborhood where a lot of people walk. And it has been one of the most wonderful ways for me to connect with neighbors, because people will pause to look and see what they see. It's monarchs migrating, or the goldenrod is covered with bees, and the conversations that come through just that opportunity of that life that's abundant when you look.
And I'll bet you share with your neighbors too. You divide that clump of coneflowers. Yep. Yeah. It is a remarkable way to connect. It seems so simple, but yeah, just being out in the world and recognizing and seeing that and celebrating that connection. Yeah. Anyone else? Yes.
Thinking back to when I was in high school over 50 years ago, I never did, but I had a lot of friends in high school that when ricing, was ready, they would go out and rice. And what was interesting to me when I look back on it, it was mainly about trying to earn, it was more a commodity thing, trying to earn money to buy a car, put gas in the car and all that. And so I didn't think much about connection at that point because I realized how much money I've earned during that time. So that strikes me. I also kind of wondered too, there was so much of that done. I grew up around Aiken, Minnesota. And there was so much of that done, I kind of wonder what that even did to the ricing crop in that area too, because it was crazy.
Yeah.
For a few years.
One of the studies that I was involved in about 8 or 10 years ago had to do with looking at what the economic impact of wild rice harvesting in the state of Minnesota was, not just for the tribal communities, but for Minnesotans, because there has been an exponential decline in the number of licenses issued for non-tribal ricers. It's about a quarter of what it was 30 or 40 years ago. The number of processors has taken a nosedive. So if you go out and harvest, most people don't have the wherewithal to finish their own rice, and there's fewer and fewer places that you can go. For the tribal communities, it was absolutely a chance to earn enough money to buy shoes and school clothes. It was absolutely an integral part of the tribal economy. And even though it is much diminished now compared to several decades ago, it is still an important and very unique driver of the Minnesota economy. It still has almost as much economic impact as housing construction in terms of the direct and indirect costs associated with that.
And the people I'm talking about, they were not part of the tribal community at all.
Yeah.
Germans and Norwegians.
It has been a traditional cultural event for non-tribal people as well. I've seen that and heard those stories. It isn't. There's a lot of Finns and Swedes that have had generations, multiple generations, and passed that knowledge on how to rice down to their grandkids. Yeah. Yes.
Has there been a decrease in the amount of wild rice that is growing, which is commensurate with a decrease in the population, or there isn't rice that's going unharvested?
Yeah, there absolutely is. Rice is an incredibly sensitive being, and it is really sensitive to all of the things that we as humans do on the landscape and in their watersheds, to pollution, to hydrologic changes, ditching or damming. Climate change is wreaking havoc. It is on both ends of the spectrum. In extreme drought years, you may get rice growing, but you can't get a canoe out there, so nobody can harvest. That's not so bad for the rice, but it's bad for the ricers. On the other side of the coin, if we've got a flood year, we can lose a whole year of productivity across a wide geographic range just because of flooding. That's what happened last year. We had sustained high water in May and June, and it literally flooded out a lot of the rice. So it is being hammered by human change on the planet. There used to be rice growing in waters all across the eastern United States, and now it's kind of confined to Minnesota and northern Wisconsin and the UP of Michigan, where tribes are actively working to restore it. So it's incredibly important for us to do everything we can to protect what is left, because it has diminished across its range. It is being impacted by climate change. It's our canary in the coal mine for sure. But the act of harvesting also is regenerative. People going out in a canoe and harvesting rice are not damaging the rice population. In fact, quite the opposite. If people are out in a respectful way, not banging it, knocking it, breaking it, respectfully and sensitively harvesting rice, they're putting 10% in their canoe and 90% into the lake. So it's hard to imagine how human harvest of natural wild rice waters is going to decimate population. So I am going to speed up and finish so that we can move on to the good stories that Chuck has to share with you. When we honor these relations, they will heal us. And boy, do we all need healing. Um, these bullets get to some of the things that we were just talking about, following the indigenous teachings and practices about having that respect, and paying attention to what our relations are telling us. Harvest the rice only when it's really ripe. A lot of people want to go out middle of August because they see the flower heads and they figure, well, there's got to be rice out there, but it's not ready. It's not the right time. We have rice chiefs that decide when our on reservation rice lakes are going to open up for harvest. Take only what you need, and there will always be plenty. If you take what you need, it means that tomorrow or next year or next generation, those resources will still be there for the next people to rely upon. And then in honoring those relations, when you harvest, show that gratitude, offer that tobacco in thanks because you were able to harvest it. And that is something that I try to be really mindful of. I say grace before I eat a meal, but I also say Chi Miigwech Gitchi Manadu, thank you, Spirit, when I'm out in the water and enjoying a beautiful day or getting ready to harvest. I say thank you for that lake trout that my husband brings home from Lake Superior, because it was a gift to be able to go out and be able to catch something that is in the world around us, in this place that is very representative of this place, and to use it to sustain myself. And I will just say, I'm gonna wrap it up with the fourth teaching and then just open it up for some final comments. The fourth teaching is really our charge at this summit, is to take what we've learned and share the word. In any way you can, use your voice, whether it's attending a summit like this and learning and doing a letter writing campaign, or going down to City Hall and marching or being part of a demonstration against some of the atrocities that are being foisted upon us right now. There are any number of ways that you can use your voice, but the important thing is to use it and to share what you are learning with your friends, with your families. And oftentimes that's a hard conversation to have. I'm sure everybody has friends and relatives that don't necessarily share your perspectives, but finding ways to have those conversations, maybe planting a seed of a different way of thinking about something. I have a very Republican brother living in Georgia, and I sent him a picture from the rally outside the EPA lab 2 weeks ago. And I didn't say anything inflammatory about it. I just said I was down here to stand in solidarity with my partners and collaborators, because evidently science isn't being valued. And he didn't respond, but he got the message in a way that was hopefully provocative isn't the right word. I hope that it helped him think about a different way of thinking about decisions that are being made, that impact all of us, that may not be very well thought out. And we all have to think about how we navigate those difficult relationships in our life. But the important thing is that we do. And if there's any final words that anybody would like to share, reflect anything that has resonated with you from today or anything that I have shared with you. Well, Chimigwich, all of you, thank you very much for your time. And as I let Chuck come over and share his stories with you, I'm going to pass out another handout that really, it's just a general list of some of the traditional plants and their indigenous uses and significance, and just something to think about as you think about how to be respectful and honoring and grateful for the gifts that have been given to us. Miigwech.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. So as I said, I'm Chuck Thomas. I'm Vice President of Northern Great Lakes Synod. I retired from my secular career in 2019 after about 40 years of working in environmental compliance positions with a primary focus on groundwater. Both the use of groundwater resources, the wise use of groundwater resources, and the protection of those resources. We have been called by God to care for creation. I'm going to show you a visual depiction of our failure to answer that call. Now, this is my home area, Upper Peninsula, Michigan. It's kind of a crude, handmade poster here, but you see all the black dots and all the blue circles? Those aren't cities and towns. Those are places where drinking water wells were contaminated through man's failure to protect. Actually, not even that, through man's negligent actions of allowing contaminants to get in the groundwater.
Yeah. What contaminated them?
Oh, a variety of things: petroleum hydrocarbons, chlorinated solvents, chemicals, industrial. Well, a lot of these places are very rural. It's from someone's own farm's diesel tanks or something like that too. Anyway, that's a very vivid example of of an area. I'm sure that this is not unique to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Sure. And anyway, so that's just a so I'm going to leave that for right now and come back to it maybe if I have time. But I wanted to talk a little bit about something that's going on in the Northern Great Lakes Synod right now. It's called the Interfaith Water Stewards Initiative. You see the big poster back there by Nancy. If you're interested, there are handout like this sitting back there on the counter you can pick up on your way out. It's basically a small version that had a big poster. I'm losing my papers here.
There's a stack over here.
Anyway, real quickly, what the Interfaith Water Stewards Initiative was created through the auspices of the Cedar Tree Institute, which is a private 503c organization in Marquette that was originated by a retired pastor, John Magnuson. I don't know if any of you know John or heard of him, but John Magnuson started the Cedar Tree Institute. And then we came up with this idea. It's a 2-year project, the Interfaith Water Stewards Initiative. It's interfaith. It's not just ELCA. If you look at the signatories on there, there's someone from the Buddhist tradition, there's someone from the Jewish tradition, there's people from the ELCA, there's someone from the Methodist Church. There are a few people on here that just say interfaith. They don't subscribe to any particular secular denomination, but they do believe in God and Christ. There's Episcopal and there's Presbyterian on there. Our goals were, faced with a global crisis regarding human health and ecological integrity, we are encouraged by teachings of our respective faith traditions to work with state, municipal, and nonprofit organizations to achieve the following 4 goals. deepen awareness of the challenges ensuring good drinking water in the Northern Great Lakes Basin by sponsoring 4 community forums and publishing 12 written columns in a newspaper. So we've had 2 of our forums so far. The first forum was creating awareness of where there are freshwater resources in the world and where there are not freshwater resources in the world, and who has access to those freshwater resources or who does not. So it was a good presentation given by a professor from Northern Michigan University. The second forum was on basically bringing people to the awareness that our water resources in the Northern Great Lakes Basin aren't as pristine as we think they are. Between what man has done and what nature, there's also naturally occurring contaminants in groundwater too that we have to deal with. So, and I was always focused on drinking water resources, but there's a lot that could be said about the water quality of our lakes and streams. Okay. We're all old enough, I think, that we might even remember the days of the Cuyahoga River catching on fire in Cleveland, that kind of stuff. That actually was the impetus behind the development of the federal EPA. Unfortunately, maybe we need another river fire because the EPA is being knocked down by our government now. I know. I know. That's why I said that's kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing. I certainly don't want to see that happen, but we need something to wake them up. I'm sorry, but we do. Our second goal was to plant 1,000 cedar trees in the 2-year period. This is one of our seedlings.
Why cedar?
Why cedar? Because we are interfaith and we have a strong relationship with the tribal nations in the Upper Peninsula, and cedar has spiritual and medicinal value to the indigenous population. I'll come back. There's a big value to planting trees, and I'll come back to that in just a minute. We also support the efforts of Northern Michigan's 5 federally recognized American Indian tribes to protect and enhance their own communities' drinking water and water quality things. And then our fourth goal was to provide workshops on monitoring drinking water and quality in rural areas as a sign of international solidarity, financially support the development of 2 drinking water wells in underprivileged nations. And we've identified one in Tanzania that ELCA is going to sponsor. And we've identified one opportunity in Cambodia that the Episcopal Diocese of their peninsula is going to sponsor. Of course, we still need to raise the money for that, but we're working on it. Now, I'm going to come back. Why plant trees? A cedar tree. Well, first of all, does everybody remember from their high school science what transpiration is? Does anybody need me to explain transpiration?
From the water that gets
No. It's the transpiration is the exuding of water vapor from the tree during its exchange when it collects carbon dioxide. It's giving off the water vapor and it's bringing in carbon dioxide as part of their photosynthesis and its growth project. A tree will soak up hundreds of gallons of water a day, a mature tree. It only uses 10% of that water. The rest of it is transpired. So trees transpire a lot of water. Cedar tree, 30 to 40 gallons a day. A full mature oak tree will transpire 100 to 110 gallons of water a day. So think about all the trees. That's a lot of water vapor getting into the atmosphere. Now you say, yeah, but lakes and streams evaporate too. Yes, lakes and streams is the majority of the water that gets into the atmosphere, but trees are adding to it too. But the benefit the trees have that lakes and streams don't is trees are carbon sequesters. So they're taking the carbon from the atmosphere and using it for their photosynthesis and growth, and they're sequestering that carbon. The average tree in its first 20 years of life will sequester about 22 pounds of carbon a year. So you start thinking about that carbon sequestration. Now, it's the first 20 years of life, because as a tree gets older, it doesn't grow quite as much as fast as it does early. So it's not doing as much when it's older, but still it's sequestering carbon. So that's why planting trees. And when I already mentioned why we picked cedar. How am I doing on time? Okay. One of the things I wanted to highlight here is part of our interfaith water stewards. I did talk about the native white cedar being one of the 4 sacred medicines. The water, all the water that we have is a finite resource. Only God can create. And he created the water that we have. And the amount of water molecules that are in our ecosystem today are the same as they were in our ecosystem when the world was created. So for every drop of water that we unfortunately don't take care of, we're taking water away from that system that's usable. So we need to be focusing on that and paying attention to it. What can we do other than planting trees? What can we do? How many of you have read or are familiar with the ELCA's 2023 social message on Earth's climate crisis? Only a small handful. For those of you who are, I encourage you to read that social message. And I encourage you to take a look at the study guide. Within that study guide are some links to some videos, some YouTube videos. Some of those videos are eye-opening, especially the ones that talk about the effects of climate change on farming. We have, there's some videos of farmers talking about how climate change has made their jobs harder. Please go take a look at that. It's on the ELCA website. Just go to the ELCA website and type in Earth's climate crisis in the search box, and you'll come to where the social message is. I mean, what I wanted to say about that, so I find my, okay. So in that social message, I'm going to read this quote. I'm sorry I'm reading, but I'm going to. Both the Creator's model of dominion in Genesis and the example of Jesus teaches us to serve others rather than dominate and degrade them. Created from earth's dust, Genesis 2, verse 7, human beings are given the responsibility to keep or care for the earth, just as God keeps and cares for us. Numbers 6, 24 to 26. The Hebrew word shamar, translated as keep, means to protect and sustain Earth's life for future generations. That's a direct quote from page 3 of the social message. So in that social message, there's some examples of things that we as individuals can do to make change. What can we do as community to make change? I already talked about one thing we can do as community. We can have a tree planting exercise. If you know of a vacant lot of land or a vacant piece of land or a piece of land that's been stripped and needs to have new trees put on, and they can talk to the landowner and have a tree planting. I'd say go for it. You're doing something for the world. You're doing something for the climate. Churches could organize, if there's a vacant lot in their town, they can organize a community garden. Because not only do you plant and fill that vacant lot with something other than the weeds, you also create a food source for somebody. Those are more group activities. On an individual basis, consider how much you drive. And consider taking this action on maybe for a day or a week or maybe a month of figure out a way to reduce how much you drive by 10%. If you're like me, there's plenty of times you hop in that car and go someplace where you didn't really need to, but just, you felt like you had to. You wanted to, I should say, but you didn't really need to. You could have organized your trip so you did everything on one trip instead of making 3 trips. So consider that. Just reducing the greenhouse gas But if each individual did that 10% less, think of the change that would make. Okay, that's one thing. Challenge yourself, you and your household, to reduce the amount of processed food you buy. Because all that processed food is packaged in unrecyclable plastics. So where those, they all just go to the landfill. I mean, it's just terrible. You will notice that you can't see my, right now I'm drinking from a metal canteen. I was really appreciative of our meal in there, that we had all the drinks were in metal cans, and that what water was there was in the pitcher. You go to seminars and workshops and stuff, and they had lined up on the table, a bunch of bottles of water for people, right? That's a tremendous amount of waste. Also, those bottles, while they don't have the harmful BP, whatever the BPA's in them anymore, those bottles are exuding microplastics. Every time you drink, there's little microplastics coming off the inside of that bottle that you're drinking. Your body doesn't do anything on the microplastic other than pass it through to the waste stream. And it gets in the waste stream and it ends up in our lakes and rivers. So that's just, and then the last thing you can do is be an advocate. And that's what this whole summit's all about, is identifying how to be an advocate for the environment. And I've reached the end of my time, but I'll open up for some questions if we have any. Not okay. Well, thank you. And there's another handout out there on the way out. It's an article that John Magnuson wrote too. And this book, The Gift of Water, published in 2023. Yeah, you have a question back there?
Yeah, if we want to do a tree planting thing at our church, let's say, how far apart do you recommend putting trees so they don't start affecting each other negatively?
Okay.
Is there a limit of how far apart you should to allow them to have the air that they need?
Yes, there is a limit, but it's going to vary from tree species to tree species. As a Christmas tree grower for many, many years, I no longer do that, but as a Christmas tree grower for many, many years, we planted our Christmas tree seedlings 6 feet apart in all directions. But as they grew, they needed to be thinned out. If you go look at a red pine plantation in a national forest, those are in rows and they're very close. They seem like they're very close together. And that's to encourage them to grow straight and tall and not branch out. So it depends on what you want your tree to do. One of the things we're doing when we plant these cedar trees, we're doing it kind of spiritually. We at each planting, we're doing a prayer. We're spreading a little bit of tobacco, for Native American tradition, and just reflecting on nature at the time of our planting. Probably. Or feed deer. I don't. Actually, where most of these are being planted, the deer don't eat them in the summer. There's something about the cedar tree. The deers don't eat the cedar in the summer. That's kind of like a winter food for them, because I think it probably doesn't taste that great. And so they ignore it until they really need it. And most of the places where we're planting these is so far to the north that the deer have already migrated out of there for winter. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, there's that too. I know, but thank you.
Groundwater